right now, as well as SARS. Okay, so I will continue with my presentation. So I'm sure you remember your microbiology class and you remember the group of viruses which cause influenza, but we will do a quick recap because you will need to keep knowing about this, because based on the type of virus that we have measures that go with it. Okay, so the pattern of influenza changes depending on the type of virus. So when we look at influenza, it is an acute respiratory tract infection which is caused by group A, B, and C viruses. And influenza-like symptoms are mainly characterized by a sudden onset of fever with rigors, malaise, person doesn't feel too well, muscular pains, and cough. So these are your main flu-like symptoms. So why is influenza of importance? Because influenza has caused major pandemics which have taken lives. And we have all heard about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which it is estimated have caused around 50 million deaths worldwide. Okay, so that was and we are living currently in a time of pandemic as well. Okay, so I think these scenes that you see here from the ward that was built to house all the patients, and we understand. Okay, if we were looking at this class last year, it was something that was rhetoric. Okay, this is something what happens, but today we are facing such kind of situations where we need to develop facilities where we can house a large number of patients. Okay, so let's look at the influenza pandemics which have occurred. So in 1918, you had the Spanish flu, which was caused by influenza A, and it was the type H1N1, and that was the one that caused the maximum amount of deaths. And then in 1957, we have the record of the Asian flu, which was caused by influenza A, and this was caused the subtype H2N, and it caused around, it is estimated between 1 to 4 million deaths. Then in 1968, we had another outbreak of Hong Kong flu, which began in Hong Kong and then became a pandemic. And this was caused by the subtype H3N2, again, similar mortality as like Asian flu. And then in 2009, we had the swine flu pandemic, which was caused by a novel H1N1. So it is not the same H1N1 as caused the Spanish flu, but this was a novel H1N1 virus. And you can see the number of deaths that were estimated. And we had more than 120 countries which reported swine flu. So just a reminder about an epidemic and endemic. I hope when you see this curve, you can see that the small red curve is what is we call as endemic. And again, if you look at your y-axis, what is put on that is the death rate. So whenever you have large outbreaks, what cause concern is ones which cause death. Now, every we have a common cold, but we are not worried about it because our mortality is not high. So every time you have a disease with an outbreak which has potential to cause death, that is what causes panic. Okay, so endemic is what happens in the background level. You always have at a certain expected constant level, and then when you have excess occurring on top of this endemic, we can get epidemics. So we have this is the similar pattern that occurs across disease. Okay, so the epidemic is when you have excess of normal, and pandemic when you have a large or geographic group or across the whole world you have cases being reported. Okay. So in influenza, when we look, we see that we face influenza every season, every winter, we have an influenza outbreak. Okay, so you have seasonal influenza and people are ready for it, and then we know whom to take care because we understand the epidemiology of seasonal influenza. Then you also have something that comes across that happens. Avian influenza is flu that occurs among birds, and it normally circulates among birds, but it can get transmitted to humans. So it has the potential for human transmission. Okay, and so therefore avian influenza is of importance. And then we have the swine flu, which was the pandemic influenza. Now these slides were made a couple of months ago, and so you can see, but I'm keeping to this because we will look at the new pandemic when we look at emerging diseases. Okay, so that we can understand influenza separately, and then we will see the similarity between this current pandemic, the similarity that it shares with influenza. And that's why initially when this came out, they said, oh, it's just another influenza flu, and so we need not worry about it. But it has made its own name because we now know that for the first time we have a coronavirus which has caused a pandemic. So seasonal influenza occurs every year due to gradual variations in the previous year's virus surface proteins and what we call as an antigenic drift. Now it spreads around the world in seasonal epidemics and it affects around 10 to 20% of the total. That is a huge amount. Okay, and annual epidemics, they result in around 3 to 5 million cases of severe illness and around 2.5 to 5 lakh deaths. So we can see that the current pandemic is yet to reach these levels. So people die every year because of seasonal influenza. And then you have avian influenza. Like I told you, it's primarily a disease of a large group of different influenza A viruses. And thankfully, this virus, it rarely jumps species. And when it is able to jump, that is when it can infect human beings. An influenza pandemic, on the other hand, happens when you get a new subtype, okay, a novel virus. And because this has not previously circulated in humans, but when it gets adapted for human to human transmission, because there is no herd immunity, it is able to very rapidly infect a large number of people. Okay. Now, it is viruses in wild waterfowl which is the ultimate source of new viruses in humans, which causes pandemics. Now, this is what we thought because till now, as you saw in my previous slide, all our pandemics were caused by influenza A viruses, and so the primary source was from wild waterfowl, so some wild birds. So pandemic influenza is the terminology that is used when you have a worldwide surge in cases, which is introduction of a new influenza, usually because of type A. So now we will have to modify this slide to say, because we have another virus which has also caused pandemic. So what we are seeing is really epochal. And this occurs, and it takes a long time in nature for the antigenic shift to occur. So usually it takes between 10 years, 20 years to 50 years for a new virus, a novel virus to develop. So let's look at what is the difference between seasonal influenza and a pandemic. So seasonal influenza causes a problem every year. Okay, now I want to stop at this time and find out how many of you have seen or read the article that spoke about Italy, looked at mortality rates in Italy from influenza over the last 3 years. Has anybody of you seen that article? You can chat and say yes, no. I'd like to see a couple of responses. No? No? All right. So I will really encourage you to see, okay, so we all knew that Italy, there were a number of deaths. Okay. Now, when we say that there is an epidemic, all right, so I will really encourage you to go and have a look at that article. So when we're talking about the number of deaths and we're saying, oh, please look at the number of deaths that happened the last year in Italy. Okay, in the last 3 years, every winter season, there are a large number of elderly people who die because of influenza. Okay, so that is something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, so when we are talking about pandemics, when we are talking about epidemics, we need to look at the previous year's data. Okay, so seasonal influenza is a public health problem every year. Usually there is some amount of immunity that has been built up because of previous exposures. But what we see that at the extreme ends of age of the age spectrum, so the very young, infants and the elderly are more at risk. Okay, and occurs because of your antigenic drift. And therefore, every year we need to have a new influenza vaccine. Now, in Nepal, we do not have a policy, but in countries where they have the herd structure has more of the elderly, you find different countries having policies on vaccination. And so that will depend on what the numbers that they face every year. While if you look at pandemics, they appear in the human population. These are rare, they are unpredictable. The human population lacks any form of immunity, and so the virulence and mortality is not entirely linked to immunity. And usually you find that all age groups, including even healthy young adults, may be at increased risk for during a pandemic because there is no virgin, because it is a virgin population and there is no existent herd immunity. But like we're seeing now, there may be herd immunity because of exposure to others, to other agents. Okay, and this occurs because of a shift. Okay, so there is a difference between your seasonal epidemic and the pandemics which are occurring. Well, what is of a concern to us now is that these pandemics seem to be occurring at a closer frequency than they were occurring in the past. Okay, so if you look at disease burden from seasonal influenza, sporadic cases are there throughout the year. You have primarily you have outbreaks which occur. Major epidemics occur between intervals of 2 to 3 years. Pandemics are rare. It takes around 10 to 15 years or more. Attack rate during pandemic is between 10 to 20%, but it can be more in close communities. So what are these close communities where you have clustering of elderly people, okay, geriatric population? Schools, hostels. Okay, these are close communities. So if it happens, and that is the reason behind the shutting of the schools and colleges. Okay, and normally these epidemics can last between 3 to 6 weeks. Okay, so this is how, if you look at the timeline of the recorded influenza pandemics. So what you can see is that it is variable, okay, this period in between which. And what we're concerned about is that now during that we have had increasing number of novel viruses, which signify increased interaction between the reservoir of this infection and humans. So as we are having increased interaction for whatever reason, we are being exposed to newer viruses. Okay. So when does the pandemic start? Usually not known. Age now. Why are we having a surveillance of avian influenza? Because of its potential to cause a pandemic. So whenever we keep a watch, so whenever you have fowl which are dying because of the flu, there's culling of birds so that there is no transmission. Okay. So circulation of H5N1 among poultry must be controlled. And so we have pandemic alerts. Okay, so there are phases in which WHO then begins to raise an alert saying there is a threat and so be prepared. Okay, so now let's look at the epidemiology. And since this is an infectious disease, we will look in terms of agent, host, and environmental factors. So let's look at the agent factors. So this is an RNA virus. It belongs to the orthomyxoviridae group. And currently we have circulating, we have A, H1N1 subtype, we have A, H3N2, we have H5N1, and we have the B group viruses which are circulating. Now, what is the need to keep a watch on these viruses is because what needs to go into your seasonal influenza virus vaccine depends on what are the currently circulating strains. Okay. Now, these are all antigenically distinct types, and there is no cross immunity between these different types of viruses. So till now, we've had only type A, which produces significant disease, which causes mortality, which causes epidemics, and which has the potential to cause pandemics. Basically because it is your type A virus which can infect both humans as well as the other species, and which also is not very stable and undergoes frequent antigenic variations. While type B is also causes significant disease, but they are responsible for milder type of epidemics. The mortality is much lower. It is usually limited to human beings, and because we do not have an extra human reservoir, and therefore it does not seem to persist among animals. Okay, and this is more stable, not having much of antigenic change. Type C does not cause very significant disease as of now, as of date. Again, limited to human beings and more stable antigenically. This is, I think, this beautiful virus, the shape we're all very familiar with now, and I think the whole world is familiar with this virus shape. Okay, because I think even the corona also looks like this. Okay. Okay, so it has two surface antigens, your influenza A, the hemagglutinin, which is HA. It initiates infection following attachment of virus to susceptible cells. So it's important for us to know which cell is susceptible to this virus so that we can make. So depending on what, you can block the entry of the virus into the cell by identifying which cell goes in when you develop the vaccine. And then you have the NA, which causes the release of the virus from the infected cell. So there are this in your influenza A, it has 16 H antigens and it has 9 N antigens. So you have various permutations and combinations which can produce and which has the potential for a novel virus. Okay, so because of the various number of antigens and the cross mixing between these antigens, you can get novel subtypes. Okay, so you understand this because you're done, you've been through, and I'm sure you're ready to give your exams. So you understand what is an antigenic shift and a drift. Okay, so a drift occurs because of point mutations, and therefore this becomes more to do with your epidemics. And a shift is a sudden, complete, or a major change and results from a genetic recombination of human with animal or avian virus. And this leads to a development of a novel subtype, which is different from its parent virus. Okay? If your normal subtype, if it has sufficient genes from H1 virus, which makes it transmissible from person to person, then it has the potential to cause a pandemic. Okay, so it suggests that what evidence we've had until now that human influenza viruses, which are responsible for the last three pandemics, and also the swine flu, it contained gene segments which were closely related to the avian influenza virus. And now we have a lot of theories about what is happening with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay, but these are all conjecture. We still need to have more data. Okay. So again, looking at the various species which can be infected by influenza A, we can see that human beings, okay, domestic animals like pigs, okay, so pigs often act like a mixer, okay, and they like amplified infection. And in fact, it might be in the pigs that where a lot of your combination of the human and the fowl virus may be taking place, okay. So the reservoir of infection for influenza primarily is human beings, the primary reservoir for human infections. The major reservoir are animal and birds. So these are swine, horses, dogs, cats, domestic poultry, water birds, and wild birds. Okay. So please stay far from reservoir of infection. That is the meaning of understanding why we need to be, because they can be a potential source of infection. Okay. The animal reservoir may provide new strains of viruses by recombination between flu viruses of man, animals, and birds. So what the animals do is your pig, swine, dogs, and horses, they can act as the mixers. Now your source of infection is from a case. So a case is one who has clinical signs and symptoms, and subclinical is they're having the infection, but they do not suffer from the disease. So asymptomatic. So both symptomatic and asymptomatic. And today, that is the quandary that we have. How do you identify? So you cannot identify people who are asymptomatic, neither can you waste your resources and identify. So what you do is you try to do a contact tracing for a person who's suffering from the disease. So maybe you would offer the test to contact tracing. Our principle in epidemiology, that we will see is how do we conserve our resources and how do we maximize the use of our resources for preventing mortality. Okay, so that is important. Disease which causes mortality, we have to focus. So our indicator for looking at the spread of the disease today would have to look at our mortality rates. Okay, so communicable. Okay, when is the person communicable? When is the infection being transmitted? So 3 to 5 days from before the onset of clinical signs and symptoms. So by the time the person is symptomatic, he has already, or he or she has already transmitted the disease, okay, the infection. And it can be in young children as much up to a week. And in fact, your peak viral shedding is by the time you develop your symptoms. Okay, so we already spoke enough, I think, about this reassortment. As you can see, you get virus from the birds, okay, and then you have domestic animals which are which also get viruses, get infected from human beings, and this is the place where you get a mix of both the bird as well as the human. And the minute you have a human element in a virus, that is when it can jump from the species. Okay, so it's important for us to understand how did it jump. A virus can only jump if it gets a favorable environment in the human being, and then the potential to cause human to human transmission. So this is important to understand transmission patterns. Okay. Okay, so determinants. So we looked at the host factors and we were looking at Influenza A primarily because that causes severe disease. Okay. So now we look at the host factors. So age and sex are very important because it can vary. What we're seeing right now is age is playing an important. Okay. So usually attack rates are much lower among adults, but you get high case fatality rate among old people and children. So this is what you're seeing even in the present pandemic. Okay, so you can see similarity. In addition, those who have comorbidities, like those who have chronic diseases, okay, respiratory problems, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, okay, all of these people are susceptible, more at risk during a pandemic. Let's look at the human immunity. Okay, so when you are exposed to the infection and the antibodies which are produced by the body to the H antigen, it will neutralize the virus. Okay, because not allow the virus to attach to the cell, and antibodies to N that will modify the infection. So normally antibodies appear within 7 days after an attack. They reach a maximum level in 2 weeks, and then over a course of 8 to 12 months, they will decline. Okay. Now, what is the season? So usually in northern hemisphere as well as in the southern hemisphere, we know that the two hemispheres we have seasons which are their antipodes. So we have when we are in the northern hemisphere, when we have summer, they have winter, and when we have winter, they have summer. Okay. So epidemic. So now you can understand in the same situation that we are right now coming out in most countries in the western hemisphere coming out of it in the summer. Okay, but the southern hemisphere is going into winter. So there is increased chance of transmission of disease. Okay, so you see how season changes the pattern of disease. Okay, so influenza occurs mostly in winter. Now, what happened? We will look when you see swine flu was flu occurred in summer. Okay, so that is how we distinguish swine flu from seasonal influenza. Okay. Sporadic cases can occur at any point of time, and usually this occurs because people travel and between the hemispheres, and you can pick up infection. Okay. Now, overcrowding can enhance transmission, and that is what we are seeing. In India, we are seeing that in pockets in the major cities, okay, like Bombay or Delhi, we are seeing that it is in the slums where there is overcrowding, where a lot of people stay, 8 to 10 people staying in one room. Despite the lockdown, you're having increased transmission. So overcrowding will always enhance transmission, and you get higher attack rates in closed population groups like schools, in ships. Okay, these are all closed. So people who are so occupation wise, also people can be exposed because of the environment that they are in. Okay. Yes. Okay, look. So when somebody coughs, this is a beautiful picture that shows the amount of particles that are released when you sneeze or cough. Okay, and so the importance of wearing a mask. But please remember that when you're carrying out strenuous physical activity, don't wear your mask because it's not good for you to keep breathing in that much amount of carbon dioxide. Okay, so how does influenza get transmitted? So mainly airborne, we know about droplet infection, definitely, and also droplet nuclei. Okay, through direct contact. So if somebody's standing with you and sneezes or coughs, and if those particles impinge on your directly on your mucosal surfaces, then the person is more at risk. Okay, and so it can also be transmitted through fomites. The incubation period varies between 18 to 72 hours. Okay, now let's look at the lab diagnosis. So virus isolation, these are all long procedures. Okay, virus isolation, virus detection techniques. We need something during an epidemic, a pandemic, we need something. But we're looking at it from point of theory. Okay, so for while you need to take nasopharyngeal secretion. So you take a nasal swab or you take a throat swab. In the current pandemic, they're also taking any secretion that is coming from the lungs. Okay, and even if they're having had to be intubated, you can draw what is coming from the aspirate. Okay, and anything that is being coughed up, sputum, if it is available, that will also be a good sample. Okay, you can have virus detection techniques by indirect fluorescent antibody techniques. Okay, inoculation into eggs for isolation, antigenic analysis. So all of this is going on currently. Okay, whether it is to produce your kits for rapid diagnosis, whether it is for RT-PCR, for vaccine production, all of this is being done currently. Okay. Now, serological tests. Okay, ELISA is very sensitive. Recently, I think there has been a report from the ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, for an indigenously developed ELISA kit. Okay, so now these ELISA kits more often will be used for sero surveys to check the level of the infection in the population rather than for a screening for patients. Okay, so normally in epidemic and pandemics, once it is available, you assume that this is a case of things. So you take all precaution, assuming it's a case, and you do confirmatory tests, but you conserve your tests and your resources. Okay. So serological tests, ELISA, you can also have heme agglutination inhibition tests. You can do paired sera to see how your antibody level is rising. Okay. So or you can do paired sera over 4 weeks. Now, this is important and what we need to remember because we are all facing this and we are all staying in our homes and we are saying, hum andar, corona bahar. You know? So, good ventilation of buildings is very important. Okay. And I think one of the reasons why we are also looking as to how Nepal, I think we are just right now going peaking. Cases are beginning to come up now. So, as people are coming in from outside, as local transmission begins, but you will see that in the lower income countries, you're seeing lower peaks and you're seeing lower mortality. So various things being done, okay, whether the virus is mutating, we have immunity, so many things being postulated, BCG, malaria, endemic areas, okay. So for whatever reason, our herd immunity, because of cross immunity, something seems to be protecting us, but that does not mean that we are neglected or say that it does not affect us, okay. So we still need to take care. So how do we prevent influenza? You need to have good ventilation. Now that cannot be overemphasized. And that is the reason for why in the current places, even where you have ACs, they're switching off the air conditioning because the air conditioning can circulate that virus. And another source of infection is that this virus can also be, excreted out. Okay, so not just in your secretions, but also when you use the washroom. So in the washroom also you can have aerosols which are coming out. Okay, and that is the reason for which they've shut down the AC systems and they're instead depending on natural ventilation. So you make sure that you're not overcrowded. There's no overcrowding. You don't have more than 2 to 3 people in a room. Okay, and you have a room of a relatively large size, but that is not always possible. But what can protect you is good ventilation to avoid crowded places during epidemics. Okay, a vaccine is not recommended to control spread in the general population. We do not have enough of vaccine. As you will see, even now, a good vaccine seems to be at least 5 to 6 months away, though they are promising it's only phase 2 trials which are going on. So even if it comes out, you are not going to have a large stock of vaccine. Okay. And as you can see, most of the countries which have resources, they demand, please send it to us. Okay. So there will be a fight among the countries saying we need the vaccine. So whom do you reserve the vaccine for? Okay. So influenza vaccines, these are recommended in selected populations. Okay, so we see the police who are now patrolling our roads, who are more susceptible. We are hearing cases. Okay, so doctors are at high risk. So doctors need all your essential services, personnel who need to see that the city is running, place is running. They need. So we need to reserve the vaccine for those who need it. Okay, so we need to reserve it for selected population, police, fire protection, health workers, those are in transportation, essential industries. So you can reserve that. In the general population, the vaccine has been reserved for those who need it more. In those who are at risk, the elderly. Okay, so the elderly population, those who need chronic diseases, you retain the vaccine for such people. It's because we do not have enough of vaccine for everybody. Okay, so we have to prioritize among who needs it. So elderly, even in this, we need to take care of our grandparents. Okay, so what do we have for influenza vaccine? There is a killed vaccine, okay, 15 micrograms, which has both your heme agglutinin. It contains antibodies to, yeah, so it'll contain that antigen so that it can generate the antibody and kind of neutralize your virus. Okay, and efficacy, again, please remember, we do not have any vaccine which has 100% efficacy. Okay, so the efficacy is between 60 to 70%, and immunity also is not long lasting. It lasts between 6 to 12 months. And therefore, revaccination is recommended every year, and every year you also have a new strain of vaccine. Okay. Now, why do we not give it to the general population? Why is not recommended? Because there are adverse effects which are associated with it as well. And so when you immunize a larger cohort of people, you will have more appearance. And when if you limit your cohort, your adverse reactions will also be limited. Okay, so you can have fever. There can be local swelling at the site of, I think, so it is painful. This injection, you can get Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, you can have. It is also those, now these viruses are grown in chick embryos. So those who have allergy to egg protein, that is a contraindication. Okay. Now, live attenuated vaccines are also available. These are trivalent. They are single dose, and the route of administration is a nasal, okay, intranasal. It's a spray. They just push it up the nose as a spray. And these can be given to healthy individuals, and these can be given between 2 to 49 years of age. So we have newer vaccines which are available. There is split virus vaccine. We also, this virus till now, what we have had all for based on your HA, the heme agglutinin antigen. We also have neuraminidase specific vaccines as well as recombinant vaccines. Okay, so the pros and cons of vaccines are there, and it is up to the policy of institutions to decide on what they want to adopt. The antiviral drugs which are available, these are neuraminidase inhibitors. Usually these are used for prophylaxis as well as for therapy. Okay, so we have zanamivir, 10 milligrams, oseltamivir. Oseltamivir was used during the swine flu pandemic. In fact, in the UK, as they're doing during this current pandemic, they are not admitting a person who is positive. They ask you to stay at home, and if you develop severe signs and symptoms, then they ask you to come. Similarly, during the swine flu pandemic, they had a list. In fact, it was not doctors taking the call. It went to a call center, and they had a list of signs and symptoms, and they ask you, do you have this, this, this? They check. If you have this sign and symptoms, they say they would just give you oseltamivir because they had it available. In India, we did not have oseltamivir available to us across the counter. These are not available OTC because at this point of time, they are at rest. So the state takes control of it, and you would only be given this drug if you went to a state-run health facility, and it was not given to you over the counter. Okay, so that is how you reserve the drugs, because everybody will buy it and everybody want to take it as prophylaxis. Okay, so we do not have enough of medication, as you can see. I think the current pandemic that we are in will help you to understand the proportion of planning that goes in when you have a large scale outbreak. Okay, so oseltamivir is 75 milligrams per day for prophylaxis. Now, how long do you take prophylaxis? Okay, so 5 days is what is limited. If zanamivir is contraindicated, then you can use rimantadine. Rimantadine is what is used more often in the previous outbreaks and epidemics. They've had success with rimantadine. Okay, so now let's very quickly look at avian influenza, and because this has the potential